Good afternoon, everyone. This is Flint McLaughlin. This is an unusual clinic in that we're being joined today by both Marketing Experiments and MarketingSherpa audiences. This was a special clinic designed to follow up the summit in Las Vegas. Some of you are aware that MarketingSherpa hosts the world's largest email summit of its kind, and this year it was at the Aria in Las Vegas. And during that time, we ran a live test. Now, there were some special tests that occurred up to that with a group that allowed us to connect with them and to work with them to try to understand the best possible way to message their audience. But during the event, we worked together to improve the results of their current messaging, and the audience gathered and worked in groups and applied information that they'd learned in the summit, and we're going to share with you the results of a follow-up test in just a few moments. I'll be joined today by John Powell. John is with me in the studio, and John is the one who supervised this. In fact, as I was doing live up, much like you will see me doing later today in this clinic, John was actually manipulating special software, building the pages on the fly that actually matched the suggestions of our audience and the work of the analysts and the scientists within MarketingSherpa, MECLABS, and Marketing Experiments. I'm going to ask John to come on up. John will shake your hand. Many of you have seen John Powell in other events. John often speaks for us, and John often hosts clinics like this. John's going to help me as he describes what's going on today. Just a couple of quick notes. We're sharing this on Twitter, Sherpa Webinar. You can use that to tweet what you learned today. Also, we want to thank our sponsor for making this event possible. You'll be hearing more about them, but once again, thank you for your support, Mantel. And John talked about how he recently used them in operating and designing this test.
Right.
And so they were very useful in gathering the sort of business intelligence that we needed to determine the messaging, optimization, and to think about the competitive messages that were coming into the inbox. So again, I'm Flint McLaughlin. We're going to start right away with the case study. I'm going to turn it over to John and just let him explain this. And in a few minutes, especially MarketingSherpa audience, you may not have seen this a lot, I'll be doing a live optimization of emails that you have submitted to us asking for our help. I have not seen them before, but we're going to apply the same principles that you often hear us teach at our summits and at our events. And in the meantime, as we're preparing for that, John, go right ahead and tell them about this case study.
Perfect. So
I'll give you this too.
Let's go ahead and start. Let me tell you a little bit about this. First, if you're familiar with some of the Marketing Experiments clinics, you'll notice that this slide kind of introduces the case study. This is a particular brand. They're called smallgroup.com, and they're actually kind of a sub website of LifeWay. I don't know if you're familiar, but LifeWay has a number of, they're like a Christian, they have a resource group. They also have a retail group in which you have stores across the nation. I mean, they're a very large retailer. And this is just one particular subset of that. And to kind of give you a sense of what was going on, let me tell you a little bit more about how this opportunity came. I'd like to introduce you here to Julie on my screen. Julie, she actually may be part of the audience. I'm not sure. I did see her on the attendee list. But she approached me. We actually talked a little bit about the opportunity of improving some of the different emails. And you can imagine with a group like LifeWay, they're very large.
And let me say something about LifeWay. They're a large group, but they're also a very focused niche group. And they make an excellent example of the many types of sites that we work with. Some of you may represent completely different interests in terms of your political positioning or otherwise. But the point here is really to understand the universal principles that apply to any niche group as they're trying to speak and communicate effectively to their audience.
Right. They had an opportunity. Smallgroup.com is actually a new product. Okay. They're trying to reach a particular prospect group who likes to kind of create their own studies, to kind of do their own thing. So why not build a product? So this is the perfect opportunity. They already had some new email campaigns going out, but they wanted to see, are these the most effective way to reach these new people and these people that have bought once before from us, but from other products, but would they be interested in this? So that's kind of what this opportunity was.
And the key here is to find, as often when we do this, transferable principles. Certainly, Julie and her team learned a lot. We're going to show you a remarkable experiment in a moment with a remarkable set of results. But many of us are involved in trying to craft the right messages. And many of us are involved in a new product launch, or we're communicating to customers who are existing about something new that we're offering. In that case, and in other examples, this is sort of the application we're looking for, the principle, and more than, say, the specific answer that LifeWay discovered, we're looking for the method by which we discovered it and the principles by which we applied that method in order to get a true result.
Right. So we brought it to the audience here at the summit, and this is an actual picture. There's Flint up there, kind of bringing the case study to them. And what I would like to do is actually show you guys the very same slide that we showed to that audience. And and there are probably 1,000 of different marketing peers in that group. This is what we gave to them. Here was the original email. Subject line, the fast, free way to create custom discipleship content. Their goal was to actually get people to try their product for free.
Yes.
And so the list, page church staff in general, pastors, small group leaders, you can kind of imagine, it's a fairly large list. And ultimately we asked the audience, how would you improve this email? And if I remember, like, they got into groups and they gave us a number of different suggestions, and I actually have a list of those suggestions from the audience. So if we take a quick look, the first thing that we saw, and I'm not sure, just wait just a moment for it to refresh on your screen. One of the first suggestions we got was about the headline. One audience member noted that it seemed meaningless, it didn't have meaning, and it needed to be kind of in a sentence form.
In sentence form, and let me just stress this, I had been teaching for some time, and in fact the keynote was about humanizing your email. One of the things that we suggested to you that is the most effective headlines and emails that we've tested everywhere tend to form complete sentences, complete thoughts. As you recall from school, a sentence represents a complete thought. Right. Whenever you don't deliver a complete thought in the headline, you require someone to think and to make meaning. I wouldn't say that this headline was meaningless, but it required more work to understand the message, which cost you conversion. Keep going.
Right. So, pretty decent suggestion. Another suggestion from the audience is that the image didn't seem to give that particular member of the audience any context for the content. So they are having trouble with the image. Perhaps it was just in the way. Maybe it needed to be de-emphasized. Another suggestion, subheader. They couldn't find the relation between the subheader and the actual content. It wasn't clear to them. Yes. Another one, somebody said, take out that whole last paragraph, the one that we just circled, the try it free for 2 weeks, and just let it go straight to the button there. And even on the button, somebody said, listen, that button looks like a banner. Yes. I might just skip right over it, or what would happen if we changed it, make it look more like a button? And then finally, of course, we had many suggestions on the text within the button, everything from learn more to learn about our free 2-week preview and a couple of others. But that was kind of the main suggestions that came from the audience that day.
And let me call your attention to this, because thus far what you're hearing is something that's going on every day in corporate America. Whether it be in the not-for-profit sector or in the for-profit sector, we've been tasked often to improve the message. Let's take an email in general. And when that happens, there are a group of people often who contribute to ideas. And at this point in the clinic, up on what slide number looks like, slide number 10 of our deck, we have discussed something probably every one of you that's involved in email has participated in, and that is the sort of the idea generation phase, where we come up with ideas that might help us improve the email. Now here's what's very important. What's important and what will sort of draw together this experiment and allow us to start live optimization together is the difference in terms of what happens from this point forward. Right. Because up to slide 10, you're not seeing anything different than what all of us do. But from slide 11 forward, we began to apply the core science that powers MarketingSherpa as we study the inspiring stories of marketers, which is sort of what this is about today. Right. Or in marketing experiments, where we run experiments to discover. Right. And at MECLABS, where our scientists are constantly working to build the training and education pieces that drive all of this. So, John, take them from there, and if you're new to this, or you're from MarketingSherpa and haven't been in this type of event before, now is where we start to learn something different. Right.
So, in the end, we had to make something. I was actually sitting up there on stage, and Julie and I kind of discussed ahead of time that she would trust me to make kind of the final calls or the final judgments. So this is what we created live on stage, and if you wanted to see the experience, you could go to that link there. We've condensed it for you.
Let me encourage you to do that. So this is live op going on. We're doing the same thing that you're going to see today, except we're doing it live at the summit with a large audience. And what's interesting, in fact, John scared me and his team, because there was a lot of technology that powered making these changes on the fly. And I was watching to see if it would work properly, if technology would get in the way of the learning. But very quickly and very swiftly, they created a simple version of that page that took the best suggestions, incorporated them into a sort of framework.
Right, and one thing that I want people to notice is that we didn't use all of the feedback. We actually used a portion of it, or most of it. But this is what we got to. These were the two side by side, and we actually put it to test. Real live audience, real people, and here are the results. So as you're waiting for the refresh on your screen, for those of you that are seeing it, total click rate was 42% more. But the thing that really stunned both us and the LifeWay team was that for the highest kind of motivation of click, or for the best kind of click possible, we had a 358% increase in button clicks. So without using any kind of tricks like making the banner clickable, even though there's no real call to action on the banner,
Yes.
things like that, we were able to see a significant increase in interest for the treatment all the way down at the bottom of the email. Whereas with the control, the majority of the clicks, even with a 0.8% click rate, were actually not with the button at all.
So that's a huge improvement. And if you follow what John is saying, it's not just a lift, but it's an intelligent lift that leads to some other possible experiments, and more importantly, shows that we're truly engaging the audience with the right message.
Right.
Keep going, John.
And that ultimately kind of leaves me, like if I'm, my team came up, and I remember Joey was sitting up there with me, and he said, so John, how did you know which feedback points to choose and what not to choose?
This is where it gets interesting, but I want to say this to you, John, too. It would be a mistake for us not to just stop for a moment and congratulate Julie and her team
Yes.
for taking the risk. This is not a MarketingSherpa victory or MECLABS or anybody from this group. We provided a certain framework, but the team that really we should be inspired by is the organization that was willing to take the risk of gathering this information, listening to criticism, incorporating the criticism, and running a live experiment to determine how effective things were.
Right.
That sort of courage is what leads to remarkable results. And in MarketingSherpa, we're always looking for what we call the Sherpas, and that is not the employees, the staff, the scientists, the analysts of our teams. It is the people out there like you who work every single day in real situations trying to discover the most effective way to get a result. And congratulations, Julie. Congratulations to LifeWay's and the team. This isn't the first lift that you got in this cycle, and we're very impressed with what you're doing. John, tell us what you did. This is sort of where the payoff comes.
So when I asked the question, how is it that we were able to choose, or how was I able to make the decision on the fly in that moment? And I recalled a really key principle here, and I want to bring this up. It's this idea of what the objective of an email is. I mean, in so many times, in so many situations, we try to sell the product in the email. And what I've discovered, and in all the tests that I've done in email and in other places as well, is that we don't necessarily need to sell the product in the email. In fact, we're interrupting somebody. We just need to sell the click. We just need to get enough of their attention or interest,
Yes.
right, so that we can continue a conversation. Just start a conversation. And what that has done is it's kind of forced me, whenever I'm in a situation, especially in live optimization, when somebody said, they'll walk up and say, John, you've done a lot of tests. I'd love to get your thoughts. What should I do, shouldn't I do? The first question I'll ask is, I'll ask them about a piece of content and say, does this help us get that click? Does that help us start that conversation, that peak of interest? Not does it help say all the thing about my product, but how does it help me start that conversation? Is it actually helping me? Is it getting in the way?
Because again, conflated objectives get in the way of performance in any endeavor. In our work at messaging, particularly in email, we sometimes confuse. Conflated is a 50-cent word used in philosophy, but essentially the conflict between two objectives that both can't be achieved at the same time
Right.
hurts performance. And we often think our job is to sell an email when the best place to sell is in the better environment that you can create with a landing page, rather than in the very limited and very competitive environment of the inbox. Emails don't display as well, you
Right.
don't have as much flexibility, and on a landing page you can do so much more. Some of us tell people just enough in the email to get them to click through to
Right.
discover what they need to know. Others of us tell them just enough, which happens to be more, by the way, in an email to determine that they don't want it, long
Right.
before they really have the information they need to make the right decision.
Right, and that's what it came down to, is do they have the right information to make the right decision? And in fact, when I was looking at the feedback, using that kind of, I guess I could call it a framework or even that kind of basis, I looked at all the feedback, and there's a couple of things that when I asked myself, what should I choose, there were two things that really stood out to me that really weren't necessarily helping me. In fact, I was at LifeWay, I was at their headquarters just last week.
Yes.
Julie was there, they were sharing the learnings, they were kind of using this to kind of as a momentum driver. And I asked the whole team, I said, in this email, this original email, which of these things, what would you do if you saw that button that said, start my free trial, right? My free 2-week preview. And they'd say, well, I think there's a credit card coming. They're going to want my credit card. Somebody just raised their hand, and I said, that's exactly what I thought. It's not helping me start a conversation. In fact, it's saying, well, I'm not interested in putting my credit card in. I'm going to leave. And that formed a hypothesis, right?
Now that's the formation. Now we're going to, again, for some of you in marketing experiments, you may have heard this many times in Marketing Sherpa, we're 2 slides away from sort of taking this to another level with you. But what I want to suggest to you is John said a very important point. Because ultimately he's seeking to form a hypothesis, and that hypothesis is always about the predictability of customer behavior. Indeed, all research should, in fact, we're talking about customer research, should contribute to our ability to predict customer behavior. If it doesn't, it's a waste. And many of us are wasting our time with research that doesn't make a difference, and we're missing the research that means the most to our performance results and our KPIs. John has to form a hypothesis. The key is that an effective marketer knows the difference between a hypothesis and a conclusion.
Right.
The hypothesis is a theory, and it must be validated. Some of us, however, are simply trying to form a conclusion, and we do that by argument. And I can tell you right now, that argument occurs, at the table when 3 of us disagree and one of us is looking for somebody to agree with us, and the guy who gets the highest paycheck comes in and decides it all for us. Right. And our best thinking is never enough. You say, why? Because the best thinking is always the customer's thinking. And you don't get the customer's thinking in a clear way when you don't design both a hypothesis and an experiment to test it. So go on, John.
And so that hypothesis is what helped me and helped us kind of, in that moment, choose which feedback to go with and which feedback not to go with.
Yes.
And this is kind of how it ended out. In the headline, notice that it made a complete understandable sentence from kind of a catchy phrase. The image was reduced and adjusted so that it wasn't taking up as much real estate, but it was at least providing some context, even though we couldn't help it anymore in the moment. The subheader is now more specific. The add your logos and colors, now you can see how that connects to what I'm offering you in the headline.
Now wait a second, a subheader is often overlooked in our emails.
Yes.
It is a transition. You have to move them from the headline, and the only goal of the headline is to capture attention and convert it to interest. Now, to do that, you've got to basically get them to read what comes next.
Right.
In a relationship building opportunity, you meet someone. If it's a guy trying to meet a girl, and I don't mean this in any offensive or unethical or politically incorrect way, right. Sometimes guys joke and call them the pickup line. But if you forget all the connotation of that, what you're really saying is a guy is looking for an opportunity to create a relationship, and it starts with a conversation, and a conversation starts with a proper statement that opens the opportunity. That statement
Right.
might be a question, that statement might be something you say about the location of you're in, or the city that you're in, or the weather.
Right.
But the bottom line is, it's a credible statement that gets them to think. Same thing occurs at this point. You are trying to enter into a conversation. This is what we miss about email. This is its force and its power. It's a dialogue, not a monologue.
Right.
And what John did here is, working with the audience and their suggestions, he crafted both a headline and then a transition point, which is, you look at just the size of the font, it helps to explain. It's not as large as the headline, but it's larger than the body content that comes below. So it eases your eyes into the text that occurs beneath it. And if the headline does that, it's achieved its goal. Because listen to me, the goal of a headline is not to sell your product, any more than the goal of most emails is to sell your product. The goal of your headline is to initiate a conversation. It does that by capturing attention, converting it to interest. Go ahead, John.
And that's what we were doing with the subheadline, is we were trying to kind of explain a little bit about what custom meant and add a little bit so that we could, again, use that momentum to draw them into the initial paragraph. And in fact, that whole last paragraph, if you remember, the audience suggested, let's get rid of it. Well, we converted it into something that, again, continues that momentum from the initial conversation, bullet points. Finally, somebody said, let's trim down the button, and that's exactly what we did. We made it smaller and gave it a drop shadow so that it resembled a button.
Wait a second, designers, I'll jump in here. I remember drop shadows because I've been doing this for 20-some years, and I have a designer sitting in the studio right across from me from my staff. I don't know why he's in here, except he think he assisted John in the development of this clinic. I remember when drop shadows were, they were the in thing. They were cool, and this guy doesn't remember because he's like 11 years old. Joey's over here. Some of you that might be familiar with Joey is sitting next to me, Joey Travella. But I will tell you this. I know that today, drop shadow are out. And in fact, look at the new designs on the iPhone. But that doesn't mean that they necessarily are wrong, okay? You gotta make a decision here. Is this all about a sexy design, or is this all about a sexy result? And often a drop shadow can help you determine that it's a button. It gives it the feeling of being three-dimensional, which is what we think when we think button. Does this mean that if you don't add drop shadows, you can't be effective? No, it just means that sometimes a drop shadow might actually give you an edge. Whether you do it or not depends on your larger goal and how important that is to you. But in this case, the team added a drop shadow, and it helped.
Right, and that was an interesting thing. The audience, even at the LifeWay headquarters, they noticed that the better designed email wasn't necessarily the email that created the most clarity for customers. And it was and so when they looked at this email.
No, say that again. That means the sexier design didn't necessarily communicate as clearly as the design you're looking at right now.
Right, and it kind of coincided with the study that we shared, even comparing what is it that customers want. You can find it on MarketingSherpa site, but people were asked, what do they want? Do they want great design, grammar, clarity, spelling, or whatnot? And by and far, every age group, it's clarity over everything else.
Clarity trumps persuasion. It's a common statement around here, and it's a critical statement for us to think about. In the end, if you have a genuine value proposition, your job isn't to use sexy words or sexy designs. Your job is to communicate clearly. This does not mean that your designs have to be ugly. I mean, we work with, in research projects with many of the Fortune 100, and the attractiveness of the design is important to their brand. We have to pass brand standards and all sorts of hoops that they cause us to jump through. But in the end, we make certain that clarity is first. When design is definitely wrong is when it interferes with clarity. When it's good is when it doesn't interfere with clarity. It doesn't even have to help clarity, but when it starts interfering with clarity, then we have a problem.
Right. And finally, the button copy was changed to a low commitment call to action because, again, most of the hypothesis was centered around, I may be interested in what you have, but I'm definitely not interested in giving up a credit card or even the thought of it.
I don't know enough yet. It's like we go back to the relationship piece. If you just meet someone,
you're
not interested in going to Hawaii with them in most cases and spending a weekend. It's too big an ask too soon in the thought sequence that develops within an effective relationship. Same thing here.
And that's what formed the treatment. So, and again, I remember again asking me finally what were some of the key lessons that we learned from all of this, is that I really value collaboration. In fact, it's kind of a necessary step even in the process that I take with a team to form kind of a hypothesis. But what I've discovered is that not all the feedback is necessarily helpful. It needs to be disciplined.
And John and I talked about this particular slide before we jumped in. By the way, I drug John into this conversation probably with an hour's notice and said, John, I really think you should get up here and participate with me. He started doing so extemporaneously. He's familiar with the test and the experiment. And again, our goal here is clarity. And I thought John could provide additional clarity to what we're doing. Let's talk through these points. And as we talked about that, I want to emphasize these 3 points. John has already mentioned one, collaboration is good, but not all feedback is necessarily helpful. I think we all know that. The problem is we don't have a way to determine which feedback is helpful.
Right.
And we often, our work inside of our organization is determined by a social sort of dynamic as opposed to a science dynamic. We end up using company logic rather than customer logic to get to the core of the answer. And so you need a method. And in this case, and this wasn't apparent in what John has said so far, but John used a very systematic framework. He used a heuristic, and he's just pulled it up on the screen so that you can see it. John, explain the heuristic to him, basically.
So as your screen is refreshing, there it is on there for most of you. This is a heuristic. It's I would say it's kind of it's a collection of what I would call key levers that we've discovered over viewing hundreds of email tests over the years, tested over 1 billion emails, and these are patterns that we've noticed in terms of human response and human behavior. Each of these letters represents kind of an aspect of the customer experience in how they view an email. For example, RV would stand for relevance. How relevant is the email to their personal lives? I mean, does it concern them? Does it concern them is it connected to a recent event? Is it connected to, are they being acknowledged in their relationship? Things like that. Those are, and then the OF is the power of the offer. Are we giving them enough clarity? Are we actually trying to draw them? Are we trying to tell them too much up front? So each of these letters kind of disciplines my mind into asking specific questions about the customer so that we could then discipline the email.
So, I know that some of you might want to have a quick understanding of this. The best way to learn it is in the various, the email course that you can take in one of our sessions, but you can also take it online in high definition TV with live lectures, and it's a really interesting course. But bear in mind, I'm not cross-selling and upselling. I'm not afraid to do that. I just know that it's a key resource for somebody that want to go deeper. What I can tell you for those that aren't able to go deeper, we're talking about the relevance of the offer and the incentive, which is a positive factor, against the negative of friction and anxiety.
Right.
And you hear us talk about that on landing pages, but there's a very special application of that to email. And it starts, believe it or not in the message, but in the email capture.
Right.
Because the relevance that you intimate or sort of imply in the email capture is going to determine whether or not the messaging that follows meets the expectation that you created when you captured their name. And it runs all the way through to the landing page. And there's a way you apply all these principles in a very key, systematic, methodical way. And we're not teaching that now. We're going to LiveOp. And if you're worried about the time, this is not our standard 35-minute session. This is a 60-minute session.
Right.
We've got a lot of time to do LiveOp. We're going to move through it with you fast, and we're going to learn a lot. But it's important that you at least learn the idea here. Once you have a smart group of people drawing on their experience, which is essentially pattern recognition, to give you a series of suggestions, you must be careful not to see them as more than suggestions. They are someone's best input. And that is good, but it's not enough. So we discipline the input. The framework that you're seeing here came from patterning thousands of experiments to discover how to see the email through the eyes of the customer. Now, once you've done that, and this is what a lot of us can do, you can think, well, I've got it whipped. But in most cases, you don't. Good news is email is one of the easiest of the sort of mediums that we can test.
Right.
And in this case, as you saw us do earlier, we created a systematic way through a proper experimentation process to take the hypothesis and either validate it or not. We did something called variable clusters for those of you that have taken our testing course. We have a course in the fundamentals of online testing, and the variable clusters enabled us to come to enough knowledge, enough learning to determine where we should focus next.
Right, and it's very clear. Like, if I wanted to understand if that was exactly the point, if it was the anxiety, by the potential credit card offer, we could simply change just that aspect of the call to action cluster.
Yes.
Or if we wanted to understand if it was, so it's set up in a way in which we could continue this, and I do believe that they're working on that now as we speak.
Yes, yes. So these 3 points sort of connect to what you saw today. And I remind you, we saw a 358% increase because a team at this organization was willing to take a risk to learn. Remember something, the goal of a test is not a lift. The goal of a test is a learning. What's important about this experiment is not just that we got a conversion lift, but that we learned something about the customer that can be applied over and over again in different ways to produce even more results. Having said that, congratulations to the LifeWay team, congratulations to Julie, and I'd like to move to LiveOp.
Excellent.
So I'm going to take this in my hand, and some of you may not have participated in LiveOp before. This is different. Lots of emails have been submitted to us. We're going to be looking at those emails, and I'm going to ask you to help me. So you should be seeing right now an email submitted by Andrea, and the campaign objective is to generate leads. And you can see the email on your screen, and I'm going to ask you to look at it, and audience, use the Q&A feature of your GoToMeeting program to help us develop a series of suggestions. You're doing the feedback now. You're part of the feedback group, and then I'm going to weigh in with the experience of our researchers at MECLABS, with the application of our heuristics, and give you some thoughts that might help not only Andrea and her company, but help you who are trying to help her, because we want to look for transferable principles that can apply to your own email. All right? So audience, start away right now. I'm going to read some of your thoughts, use the Q&A, and give us some feedback as to things that you might do. The text wrap for June is awkward. Someone said that, and I appreciate that, Brian. No, that was Dustin. And someone said, we need bullets to summarize the benefits. That was from Laura. And just keep using that feature. Here's another one. The button is too high a risk with the reservations included in the text. I agree with you, Angela. Excellent point. Someone said they're selling a booking, but the click is for information. Interesting. So we're talking about a conflict here. Andrea, listen to this. There's a lot of good feedback here. And I want to say this to you and to each of the people that we helped today. You can take the feedback. I'm going to give you specific suggestions, but once I've done so, you'll be able also to build your hypothesis and redesign a page, and we'll comment on that for you and sort of help you. You can contact John or our team here. Somebody here will come alongside of you so that you can get the most value out of the time that we've invested together. Let me just talk about some other ideas. The call to action is too low on the page, says Amy. That could be or not be true, but it's a good point. Perhaps the discount could be included in the headline or in a subheadline. That's Angela. The image to text ratio is off, says Lauren. The top photo is too big, says Mona. The highlight that you will be saving 5%, or you need to highlight that, says Christina. The text is crunched in around the, I can't read that, something pics. Is it huge pics? It might be a typo.
Yeah,
I think it says high pics.
Huge pics.
But unless that's a technical term that I don't know, I'm going to go with huge. Somebody else says remove all packages, as this content would be better served on the landing page of this offer. Now you keep thinking about your ideas. We actually study them after the call to sort of determine the patterns that our audience is learning and thinking, and to also sort of determine their level of sophistication. For now, I want to talk to you about this email very specifically. Okay, so we have something, first of all, that I think they've done that's right. It is almost the form of a letter. It's not a catalog page sent to you. It isn't sort of meant to be simply a landing page. One of the great tests for an email is if it is a landing page sent to you in your inbox, it's probably a bad email.
Right.
It might be a bad landing page. It could even be a great landing page, but it's definitely a bad email. Because a good landing page is not a good email. They have different objectives, and they typically look and flow differently. This should be a message, and it should have the feeling, I'm not saying it has to be a letter, but it should have some of the commonalities of a letter. We have that here with paragraphs, text, and a call to action at the bottom. But let's talk about problems. First of all, the text is in red. Most of our research has shown that red is the wrong color, and we have a clinic on this. And Sherpa has experiments on this. Marketing Experiments also has done hardcore experimentation on color. I'd be careful with the red on white. Secondly, book your Italian seaside holiday early and save. I don't know if this list was sent only to people interested in Italian seaside holidays.
Right.
But if it was not, you have now excluded everyone else that might be interested in coming to your site. Now, again, Andrea, I know that you can't talk to us live here and explain to us what's going on, but over and over again, I see us use something called exclusives. And I don't mean the sort of exclusive that's good, i.e. we do something no one else can do for you. I mean the sort of exclusive that excludes a large percentage of the people you're talking to. If your headline focuses on something that doesn't appeal to a large percentage of your audience directly and specifically, you're losing relevance. Remember the RV in the formula, and it's hurting you. I would also say that less is more. You can probably accomplish the message's impact with a smaller font.
Right.
I think when you get too large a font, it's like too loud a voice. You can hear me at this voice, but if I start screaming at you like a tent revival preacher, it might not be as effective, regardless of the fact that you can actually hear me clearly. Let me move on. Book your seaside vacation for June, July, September, and save 5% on the total cost. Now it says seaside. Is this Italian seaside, or is this one of the many Italian seaside being one of the many types of seaside vacations that you can get from this point? This isn't clear now by the very text that follows it. And then it says this offer is valid for half or full board options, weekly and daily packages, and for those who prefer also our residences. To be eligible, you must reserve by June 1st. The most important statement is sort of lost because you work so hard to get there. It's good that it's at the end of the paragraph, but it would actually be better at the beginning of the paragraph. In fact, it would be actually good to use as an urgency in a subheadline underneath the top headline, because we've now added what I would say relevant interest. In fact, if you want to have strong appeal in your note, remember these 3 points. You're always looking for relevancy, urgency, and importance. If it isn't relevant, it doesn't apply to me. If it isn't urgent, it may apply to me, but I don't need to do it now. If it's not important, well, it may be relevant. It might be urgent in the sense that I got to act now if I want it, but it's really not important enough to do that because I've got other things that are more important that are going to consume my time. The world is full of people who don't do what they could do because they must do what they must do. And we get caught between the two. So let me suggest for you that your headline should appeal to all three, and if you want to use urgency as a key lever in driving them to respond, then don't bury it in a paragraph. Put it up there in a subheader, because now you've given them another reason why they should read that next paragraph, because their time is running out.
Right.
And that's what you're implying. Now, I want to point out something to you very closely, and the other pieces that we look at we'll go through faster because we'll have covered some of these principles. But the goal of marketing is different than the goal of sales. Sales makes claim. Marketing fosters conclusions. What you're trying to do in this email is get me to draw several important conclusions that will get me ready to sell. The ultimate conclusion for this page is, I can't afford not to click on this button. Now, hear what I said. That's different than just the positive of, I want to click on this button. I think sometimes a negative has more force than a positive. So I either want you to say, I want to click on this button, or I can't afford not to. Now, why is I can't afford not to more important than email? Here's why. Because most of us read our emails in order to eliminate them, just like you do the mail that comes in the post office. You get a stack of envelopes, you throw out as many as you possibly can. And cunning vendors and merchants try to disguise their offer to make it look like a check.
Right.
Or anything they can do to get you to open the envelope. It's very familiar to what happens in email. When I'm sitting in my inbox, there's 40 messages in there. I know that I can only read 3 to 4. My first move is not the move of discovery, it's the move of elimination. I am burning as fast as I can every email that I don't need to read. So you've got to give me something here. And I'll tell you, even if I read it, the last thing I want to do is click and have to start over in my inbox afterwards.
Right.
I don't know why. It's only seconds, but somehow it feels like you have to jump in your car and drive 10 miles. Right. Because we're not dealing with things as they are, we're dealing with things as they are perceived. So in this particular email, I would have started with a stronger headline. Right. I would have made sure it was relevant, important, and urgent. Mm-hmm. I would have considered putting this urgent factor that you have. It's not the only subheader, but it would make a good subheader. I would shorten the first paragraph. It's too long, and there's no iPath through it. It should be some bold text, better yet, one sentence and some bullets.
Right.
The second paragraph says, all packages include private beach service with entertainment, baby club, Sky Vision, internet access, bicycles, secure Listen, I'm not even read it all.
Right.
What's my point? It doesn't belong here.
Right.
That's the sort of thing that belongs on the landing page. That does not increase the chances of me getting a click. It decreases the chances because I think I know enough to make a decision I don't want it.
Right.
And it also makes it hard for me to read the email because it looks like a lot of things I have to worry. And then we come up with this famous line, hurry. This offer ends on June 1st. Well, we just said that at the end of the first paragraph. We're saying it now again. We're wasting the space, and we make people feel like they're being manipulated, just pushed. So underneath that is special, 65 plus for guests over 65. Now, look, I don't know what you can do, but if I can subset my e-list and know that there's a group of these people that are 65 years of age, they should be getting a separate email altogether.
Right.
And if I know that not more than, say, 5 or 10% of my audience is 65, why am I going to take this big, precious space and hammer 90% of them or 95% with information they don't need and isn't relevant? I'm indicating to them with this that the email is not that important. And then request information and reservations. Request information sounds like, oh, buddy, a salesperson's going to hit me. And reservation sounds like, oh, no, I got to commit.
Right.
Both of these things I don't want. Wrong wording. Wrong place in the thought sequence. Now, John is with me. We're going to look at another one in a moment, but audience, may I stop with you for a moment? Is this helping you? Do you like what we're doing here together? Give me some feedback using the QA feature so that I can optimize our time together. We're going to use the remaining 20 minutes as fast as possible. I'm watching as they come in. Yep, I like it, says Carolyn. Keep coming in. I won't read them, but I'll just watch them. It's going to help me. John, I'm going to cue this up. Audience, give us some feedback, but then go look at this email and tell me how you would improve it. Here it is. It's submitted by Carolyn. Carolyn, thank you for both your courage and your desire to get better results and to take risks to do so. And I'm already getting input. Someone says the text is an overload. Too much content, says Julie. Too much copy, says Angela. Too much text, says Sarah. I think our audience is divided.
Right.
I'm just teasing. Yes. So that's a different issue. Keep going this way. Way too much text, says Aaron. All right, while you're thinking about it, keep your feedback coming because I'm going to go back and I'll be reading this while John is talking, looking for key thoughts. And somebody says use a data sheet image. That's an interesting point. John, what are your initial thoughts on this email?
Well, the first thing is if you go into the headline, it's just so specific. It's one of those, you talk about exclusives.
Yes.
I think the vocabulary and the use, you could easily, if somebody doesn't want to think that hard, you're already in a zone where it requires somebody to really concentrate, especially even if you're familiar with the terms. Why not start off with something else that generally, that relates more to general human appeal? Like if this is something that's new, if this is something that's comparably different, why can't you start off with something like that? So instead of saying industry's first fully encapsulated 50A digital power module, just say something a lot simpler with a lot less words. It's easier, quicker to process.
So let me agree with John and let me drill down on that for the group here. I would agree with you that your specific audience probably knows what that means. But I would also argue that the sentence is full of adjectives and nouns, virtually no verbs. And so it doesn't actually have the connotation of a complete thought. And you have to look at it and you have to think about it. We call that here too much unsupervised thinking.
Right.
I want to guide your thinking. I don't want to leave you on your own to sort of work like one of those Survivor series on television to work your way through and survive the perilous email and finally get to your destination. And that's what it feels like when you have to work through big, long, multi-syllable words stacked one against the other without clear verbiage that drives me forward. I don't have a meaningful sentence. And then I'm going to take it one level further. All of that means nothing to me unless it does something for me.
Right.
You're assuming that I know that the industry's first fully encapsulated 58 digital power module optimizes system power efficiency on the fly, that I know exactly how that's going to make my life better. But in the end, I'm not even interested in how it's going to make my company better. I'm interested in how it's going to make my life better.
Right.
Because, as they say, all politics is local and all performance is local as well. If you can show me how making or utilizing this will make things better for me because I'm making things better for my company, even if you imply it, you're getting more relevant to me individually, the decision maker, who is going to terminate your existence, for me at least, in this relationship with a single click of my finger on the mouse, which looks not much different than this remote.
Right.
So the headline, I think, misses it. As John said, it's too hard. Keep going, John.
Right, and the key theme for this whole email is unnecessary difficulty. And look at the amount of text. And I've seen emails in our database where all they did was they simply took all that detail and consolidated it to half of the visual space.
Yes.
And added some headers, and it could still be improved, but that could generate a 40% increase in response. So I think a key here is eliminating the unnecessary difficulty created by all the details and all the text. Only figure out just enough to get them in, and also get data sheet. That's great for people that are ready to look at a data sheet. But what if you simply want to see different aspects of it? What if you don't want to be limited to that amount of detail? What if you want to casually look at it? Something that doesn't feel hard.
All right, so let's look at the audience's let's look at the unspoken hypothesis of the person who designed the email. Because underneath this is essentially a hypothesis, and that hypothesis could be right or could be wrong.
Right.
My guess is that with another test, we could actualize a treatment that challenges this hypothesis with a new one and thus produces greater results. But it starts sometimes by going backwards. And not thinking about your new hypothesis, but by looking at the old hypothesis. I think people assume that there's a person who, number one, is very familiar with the technology itself.
Right.
Number two, that they can draw a conclusion between that series of verbs and adjectives to their own particular needs, and they can do it instantly. Because if they have to work to do it, you know that's going to hurt conversion. So you must be assuming when you design the email that they can do that instantaneously.
Right.
Which I doubt. Secondly, you must assume that they're so interested, they're willing to wade through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-line paragraph, chocked full of acronyms and symbols. Now, I suppose certain people might be willing to do that, but you're not trying to appeal to the most motivated people in your audience. You're trying to appeal to the largest sector of qualified people in your audience. And because of that, you have to look at that paragraph differently. Is there a way for that paragraph to move me towards the red button? And is there a way for it to move me towards the red button far more efficiently? Here's one of our problems. Adequacy is the enemy of excellence. And sometimes we ask the question, how do I write this email instead of what is the most effective way? Let's go back to the paragraph. How should I articulate the first paragraph is not the right question. The right question is, what is the most effective way to communicate in this paragraph? Now that requires you to know what you want to say and how what you want to say is going to move them down the thought sequence. And if you haven't thought about that before you wrote the paragraph, you're not prepared to write the paragraph yet. So we would tell you instantly that there's no iPath through that long paragraph, that it's difficult to digest the content, and that it doesn't drive me with forward momentum towards the bottom. So you have a hypothesis that this person desperately wants this, that there might be a gun to their head, and if they got 60 seconds or else the trigger is going to be pulled. Because without that sort of motivation, I'm going to terminate you with this little button that God gave us. It's one of the most wonderful things in technology. We have the power now. Girls, I talk about the difference between, and the similarities between relationship building and sending an email. Don't you wish you could just push a button and some guy that bothers you at a bar disappears?
Right.
Most of us don't have that button, but we have it here in the commercial environment, and it's quite useful. And again, I don't mean to be offensive when I say that, but it's a wonderful way to explain what we're up against here. Because we are building relationships. It's not just a metaphor. If you're building a genuine enterprise, you must build genuine relationships. Let me go to the second paragraph. Is it necessary at all?
Right.
I love this letter, used in conjunction. I know I got a problem already. When you start using words like used in conjunction, why? Sorry, the wrong word almost slipped out of my mind. Used in conjunction with Intercel's Power Navigator GUI, the highly integrated before you haven't said anything yet, and you've loaded the sentence up with the sort of clauses on the front side that fill my brain up and take the room I might have left to digest what comes next.
Right.
Now, you do have bullet points, congratulations. But I'm not sure if the bullet points are designed to explain to me how they translated the benefits, and more importantly, there's another piece in your hypothesis, that the data sheet is exactly what I want.
Right.
You could be right, by the way, especially to the audience you're emailing. They may be used to getting data sheets. That may be how they evaluate products. But I want you to be clear about your hypothesis. Your hypothesis is that they want that data sheet at this point more than anything else in the world, because if there's anything else you can give them that they want, and they want it more than the data sheet, it should be right here. All of this makes you question whether or not this email was designed by understanding the difference between adequacy and excellence. And here's the good news. I'm not trying to beat up Caroline. I'm trying to encourage every one of you here that with a systematic way to think, you can discover, you can see the page with a new set of eyes that understands how the customer is grappling with what you've done, and you can make it easier for them to make the right decision. The goal here isn't to make anyone choose the wrong product for the sake of your P&L. The goal is to find the right person, present the right product, and help them make the right decision. Let's move on to another email, okay? And while you're doing that, I want to get to the audience to tell me this third piece. Here it is, live optimization.
Next slide.
Okay, next slide. Well, that's a different one. Good. We have something that looks different than the last two. So this is interesting. The campaign objective is product sales. Is that the full email, or can we scroll down, or how can we see it?
Two more slides. So if you click once.
All right. So audience, as you're helping us optimize, I'd like you to look at the second part of the email. It'll come up in a moment. There's a lag. So this is the long email. And then from there, I'm going to take you now to the third section of the email. It's very hard to hold all of those in front of you. And let's hear your thinking. Okay, so I have no idea what I'm buying, says Laura. It looks like an ad, says Meg. It's confusing, says Zara. It's too many click options, says Justin. Where's the call to action, says Andy. Have no idea what this is about, says Sam. Too long, need to get to the point. Email is too long, says Aaron. I'm traveling to Switzerland, to a foreign country, Amy says. Too many options to click on, says Lauren. Looks like a landing page. Interesting point, Julie. And on it goes. Shop bowls is too low, and the navigation doesn't look like navigation. It looks more like a landing page. And Glenn says, this is a storefront. Okay, my audience is getting smarter and smarter. I think I'm just going to resign and have you guys do this next week. What we want to do, again, here's the point. The point isn't either to beat up the person who submitted the email. The point isn't to impress you with how clever anybody here is. The point isn't even to come up with some suggestions. The point is to take suggestions, discipline them to a framework, like the heuristic we discussed, take the framework, build a hypothesis, take the hypothesis, test it with a design of experiments. The combination of these things turn ordinary marketers into messaging geniuses. Now listen to me when I say that. I'm not even saying that as a jest. The genius doesn't come from you suddenly gaining 50 points in your IQ. The genius comes from you sharing in 50 points of the customer's IQ. If you can add to what you think, what the customer's truly thinking, you now have closed the gap between what you know and what you need to know, and that's where you become brilliant. And the interesting thing is the path to brilliance isn't 20 years experience. The path to brilliance isn't another marketing degree. The path to brilliance is a way to see into the customer's mind. And all that we offer in this is a systematic method that helps you see into the customer's mind. You come out with more insights, and brilliance is measured in one thing only, brilliant results. A 358% increase, as Julie and her team got. I would call that a piece of marketing brilliance. And a good manager would also, especially if you can can it and make it a part of your normal results in an organization. So I come back to John. John, what are your thoughts on this page? Go ahead.
So the first thing is I'm assuming, based on the email, that number one, these are just people who are interested, or maybe they're sending it to people that have never seen it before, because there's nothing more than just showing me the product that I can immediately see, like shop bowls. Are these new designs? Are these recent designs? Is this a new collection? Is there a reason why I should consider it? Because if I'm part of your list and you got me as a part of your list, I've probably already been to your site and I've already seen everything. So why is this any different than what I've already seen? How is it any different? How is it any more relevant to me than your site was a day or two or 10 days or 20 days or 30 days ago.
Yes.
That's the first thing. I mean, even taking a look, how much of the banner is even necessary too. Let's just assume that the Bulls are interesting. How long does it take me to get there? And then you've got the part on quasi-designs, which tells me what makes you different. But again, is this a list of people that have already been exposed to you? Do they already understand what makes you different? Why are you going to waste space on that if these are already people that understand who you are and what makes you different? If these are people that you're just trying to get in, that you've rented a list, okay, that makes total sense, right? Even the word shop bulls, number one, I can't even see the button. It disappears. In fact, it took me a couple minutes when we were putting this into the PowerPoint to see that there was a button. Right?
Let's just stop there for a second. John is absolutely right, and I just want to simplify what he's saying with two thoughts. There's a sort of two-part test here. The first test we talked about earlier, does this look more like a email, a two-way message, or a landing page? Well, we know what that is. It looks like a landing page, so that's a failure.
Right.
But here's where the problem is. Does this look like a good landing page or a bad landing page? It's a bad landing page. We have a double failure. You send a landing page, and worse, you send a bad one. Now, Anna, don't be upset with me, because I'm sure that you probably got that advice from John Powell or from Joey Travella or somebody here. And it's not your fault. We'll take all the blame for it. But let's talk about how you make it better. Number one, do not confuse me, not just about the message, but don't confuse me about the medium. We focus on the message and realize that the message is always delivered in a context. When you send me an email with gray on white, you got a bad color, number one. Number two, because gray and white we've tested, it gets a poor response rate. Number two, it is all caps, which we've also discovered gets a poor response. Number three, it looks like nav, and I don't know, is that clickable or not? There's no blue underlink. It's coming in my inbox, and do I really want to click on that? And if it's more than that, I don't even see it, because banner blindness focuses me on this other word. And if I'd like to look at the words that jump to my mind, I'm going to step, because my camera is blocking part of the page. I see the words, these are the words that I see. Swaziland, far and wide, quasi-designs. Now, ask yourself a question. What am I supposed to make of those words combined? Am I in some sort of chair for a psychotherapist and we're doing free association? Does this somehow add up to a travel opportunity for me? And what does shop bowls mean? If you look at that fast, you're not even sure what you're looking at, and you don't see it, and it's in all caps, and it's got an arrow on it, so is that the button I'm supposed to click on? And if I am, why is all that stuff below it? And what is a quasi-design? And it gets more confusing the further down the page you go. Now, what's worse is, if you were to think about this email the way many of us do when we're designing it, we would miss the problem that's really occurring here. The problem is, the person who received this email received 46 more this moment. They're going to eliminate at least 42 of them. They're going to give these emails less than 3 seconds to make the decision, and in less than 3 seconds, I have to work far too hard to make meaning of this page. Worse, there's no conversation. You're not talking to me, you're talking at me. You're sending me something.
Right.
You're not sending me a message. The something is a page full of pictures and perhaps some products.
Right.
But you have not one time opened your mouth and spoken to me like a human being. If I walked into a retail store and I needed help and no one said a word to me, and I did see someone across the hallway and they started throwing objects at me, hitting me in the face and the head and the body, and I've got to catch them, figure out what they are, and determine what I want to buy, you'd be in a situation similar to this with one exception. I have one of those buttons that make people disappear in my hand, and the minute you pick that damn thing up and throw it at me, I'm going to squeeze the button and wipe you out. And that's the sort of frustration. And you might be here saying, that's too hard on the person who designed this page. I don't mean to imply that attitude towards you, because I'm on your side. This is Marketing Sherpa. We're looking for Sherpas in marketing. We're looking for marketers that are doing inspiring things. And I'm not at all trying to disappoint you. But if you don't appreciate the frustrated hostility of the average person moving through an inbox at the end of a difficult day, and if you don't approach your email with the same sort of sarcastic, frustrated, almost angry, and out of time attitude, you can't see it through the eyes of the average person who's reading that piece of media that you sent to them. And there is where we lose, because the two most important words in marketing are often overlooked. There are two words that are simple. It is almost the end of our day. We have 2 minutes left. In those 2 minutes, if you came away with nothing more than this, it might help you write a better email. I think two most important words in marketing are this: so what? You can add words in the middle, but most of them aren't something I'd like to say in the clinic. That is the attitude of the average person who is reading this. So what? and you don't have a strong answer in this email to counter the so what attitude of the average prospect that received this in their inbox. Now, Anna, and every person that was involved in submitting pages today, I want to help you. Our goal certainly isn't here to discourage you, just the opposite. Take the thinking of our audience. Take what we've been saying. Start to design the email. Let it represent a new hypothesis. Identify the old hypothesis just by thinking about how the email was designed. Right. Consider a new hypothesis. Then get with the people from Marketing Sherpa here, and we will work with you to get the best version of this, and you can test it. We may even share the results in an upcoming clinic. The goal here is to help you. Now, I'm being printed a whiteboard and shown a message. What is the message you're trying to tell me?
If you want them to email a response, they can send it here.
Send it to live@marketingsherpa.com, and we'll help you with your thoughts on this. We have many more that we didn't get to. If you like this, we might do something like this in the future. How many of you enjoyed the live optimization? Let me see your just respond with a Q&A over here so I can measure it, listen to it, and we can all use it to make decisions about the future. Thank you. As many of you as you can, just take a moment before you leave and respond this way. This helps us. You're being very positive and you're being very gracious to us. We've been doing this for many years, and the only thing that really matters is when we see an inspired marketer go out and do something amazing. Keep doing that and tell us your stories. And let us inspire other marketers at Marketing Sherpa in the future with your inspiring stories. John, thank you for being with me today.
Thank you.
And congratulations again to the team that we discussed in the beginning at LifeWay. And thank you. We'll be back in touch soon.